Chris, and Joey. Yeah, so just L. Okay, so let's get going here. So I had initially blocked out 2 weeks. I was kind of thinking about things this weekend, and then I initially blocked out 2 weeks for this project of interpreting your own space, thinking about your own space. So I think what I'm thinking, you know, I got a lot of commentary that this was hard, that I can't really figure out the angles, sort of thing. It's really hard to measure and approximate angles kind of at the same time, process both those things. Anybody else have any difficulties?
Me.
Okay, yeah, all right. You said that in your email. What did you find hardest, Alyssa?
I was so confused because I was trying to get the angles back from when I did the vanishing point.
Yeah.
So I kind of got them. And then when I was looking at the videos, you was talking about like measuring like with your pencil and space. I was like, oh my God, I cannot do this.
I know, it's really difficult. And it's a really foundational, it's the same process you were doing with the sheet of paper and the book, by the way, right? So I'm kind of moving you guys into this technique, right? Slowly, but it's a technique that every artist should know how to do, particularly somebody who's drawing. Yeah, you can kind of, when I say it, kind of conceptualize it, I think, but when you go to practice it, it is a whole different can of worms, right?
Yeah.
You know.
And I know.
Go ahead.
I was like, and I know if I sent in my first sketch for the thing, I would have got a bad grade on it because it was not working.
Yeah.
The TV was bigger than the ceiling.
Okay, well you bring up a really good point here. I'm going to go into screen share mode here. I'm going to show you an example. This was nice because this is from the other class, and I thought it was a good example because this is Sarah, and she sent me an email midweek last week showing me her first attempt at it, right? I think it was probably, she's maybe Tuesday or Wednesday of last week. She's a Monday class. So so she got kind of jumped into it early, right? And then I was able to give her feedback. So I would suggest, if you're having problems with the drawing, don't wait till the last minute to do the drawing, okay? I know I sound like a broken record, because that puts you at a disadvantage because you can't get feedback from me, and I have those Thursday classes for you guys as open Q&A, okay, to come in and talk about specifics of your own problems with the particular work, okay? So to answer any questions you might have. So as a side note, just remember to get started early if you can, okay, so that then these problems start arising. And by the way, this is kind of the heart of the whole matter. You don't know anything in art until you do it, okay? You can, as a practitioner, right, as an artist, you don't know, like an art historian, for instance, could conceptually know about linear perspective, right? But they wouldn't really understand it until they actually acted it out. I know I'm acting or sounding like a little bit of a snob here in terms of artist versus art historian, but or aesthetician or art critic or whatever the case may be. So the part of the problem is I'm giving you all this information, like you said, Alyssa, you're going back and looking at the videos and it's still confusing. And then, but on the second attempt, right, the things got a little better, right? Because understanding started to creep in, okay? So my point is, you really don't understand concepts in terms of art making until you engage in art making, okay? And that's a really difficult thing to comprehend when you first kind of get your feet wet with dealing with art at a little bit higher level, right? Other than what we maybe do just on our own, because we're dealing with really complicated concepts here, right? But the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? I mean, that goes without saying. Here's a image. I don't know which one this is here. This might be. Yeah, there it is. Okay. And you did that too, Christine, by the way. So I have Christine's here as well. Can I show it, Christine? Christine? She's still here?
Sorry, yes.
Oh, yeah. May I show your drawing?
Yes.
Okay. So the reason I bring this up, this was Christine's first version here, and then I just did a side-by-side with the final version, right? And you can see some differences, right? Just kind of roughly hewn here, not really kind of, but as you talked about, Christine, you're having some trouble with angles and all that sort of stuff, right? And how does it become 1 point, 2 point? 1 point versus 2 point, which we want 2 point. So we talked and kind of talked through some things, and then I think maybe one or two more variations, right, Christine, before you got to the finished, right?
Actually, no, I just reworked.
Oh, reworked that same drawing, but you adjusted and shifted things based on feedback from me, right? Yeah. And then ended up with a really nice drawing, I think, that reflects, it's a smaller room, right? So, it kind of reflects that kind of intimate space of the room. And look where it started, kind of, right? So, pretty good here, but, things were a little bit off, and we just discussed it and came to this, right? Really nice drawing, very beautiful drawing, very difficult drawing. And then you had some questions about this, and I think I sent you an update on those on the little drawings on the wall here in terms of the perspective of those. So I don't know if you got to that yet or not, but
yes.
You did, okay. But really beautiful drawing. And then Sarah in the other class, same kind of thing. She sent me this image to begin with. Hers a little bit more defines a little bit more the problem that you guys are facing. Where Christine's like this, pretty close to this, but there are radical differences if you really kind of look carefully at it. Here, though, even more radical differences. So I'll use this one as an example. But in both cases, it's like you got to start somewhere, and then you got to fix it. Okay. Now let's look at the Sarah's here. What would you say the difference between these two images? The major difference between these two images is there's her first one, there's the starting one, and here's the finished one. What's the first thing that impresses you about the two, apart from maybe line quality, and I'll even say perspective?
Wall.
Okay, this wall, which wall? The wall.
The wall to the left of the windows.
Okay.
It's not in the original.
Oh, here, right here. You're talking about where that little kind of painting is or something right there? Oh, this, yes, exactly. This little thing here you're saying, Taylor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's a very good point. So obviously missing a major plane in the drawing, right? She said she saw it, but then she just didn't know how to register. It didn't register, like, let's put it that way.
That and the ceiling isn't in the original.
That's okay. So you're getting close to what I want to get at here. So you're saying the ceiling isn't in this one. It might be that line right there.
It looks like she tried to put like an open gap right there in the top of the ceiling that isn't in the original drawing.
Yeah, then she has these two things still angling, right? But in the original drawing, then that's where, right there is where the ceiling starts to come at us, right? So you have to draw these two lines right here and here, right? So she totally missed that, right, to begin with, right? That ceiling's coming at us, right, from that point on. But you were getting close to what I wanted you to get at here, an overarching idea.
Depth.
Well, that's the same thing, depth, but think about it in terms of position and space. You're getting close, yep.
It's the wall on the left side. I had the same kind of mistake in mind. But if you look at the lines, the top wall of the wall should be going up, and the bottom in the second drawing is not as steep.
Yes.
An angle.
Right.
So that wall is, the perspective on it is completely modified.
Yes, and there's I'll show you how that happened here in a second. But I'm not even talking about perspective yet.
Wasn't it?
Not yet. But that you're making those are all correct assertions, right? But those are a little bit more kind of part related details, right? I'm talking about the overall vibe of the drawing. What's the difference between the overall vibe of the drawing? And Taylor, you're kind of hinting at it. Some of the things I kind of talked to some of you guys about when you were sent me one of your images or whatever, first image or your final image. Overall vibe, I'm talking about.
Composition?
Composition, right? Yep. So what are the difference between the two compositions?
Well, she's included more in the second drawing. In the first drawing, she's really just honing in on the window.
Yep. Yep. So this one's a much closer view of the room, right? In other words, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. This one's a little more expansive, little further back. If you can do it, I tend to think with these drawings, it's easier to navigate the drawing if you're a little bit further back, if you can get there. And that's what I didn't want to kind of run out and say it, but because I wanted you guys to kind of work for it. But Christine's here. This view, you can obviously see, you can see the bottom of the couch here. Here, it's way off the edge of the paper, right? So just a little more inclusive gives you a little bit more ability to read what's going on, okay? That's one thing. So that's framing. That's layout. That's blocking of the drawing to begin with, okay? And that's a tricky thing, because most students will just jump to the first thing that kind of just like happens, right? And then just go with the flow. And that is problematic, okay? So what you have to do is either, like you did, Alyssa, you're like, I start over. Did you start on a new sheet of paper or just erase? If she can hear me. Did she go to work already?
No.
Oh, okay. Did you start on a new sheet of paper or did you erase your first drawing?
No, I started on a new sheet.
Oh, yeah, okay. And so sometimes that's a good thing to do. Like Sarah started over 2 or 3 times here in this one. Christine felt she didn't need to. She could just kind of subtract and shrink a little bit, right? So there's 2 approaches to that. But definitely you got to start over on a drawing, particularly these types of drawings. They're so tough to do. So the framing.
I have restarted 3 times now, and I finally got the proportions somewhat right.
Right, exactly. Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about, you know. And now the phone will help you, right? The phone will help you get to that, kind of get an idea of the framing, but it really doesn't, there's no substitute for trial and error in this regard.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at these like pictures or whatever that's on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not going to vanishing points, how does this stuff look so 3D?
Wait, okay. Well, that's a good question. I'm going to get to that right now. So Alyssa's asking if we're not literally using vanishing points in our drawing, how is the artist making it look 3-dimensional? Okay, so that's a good question. The knowledge that there are vanishing points will inform your approximation process of the angles, okay? So here's a for instance. Let me save this.
Is this class recorded?
I'm recording this one, and I'm gonna upload it. So I'll give it to you, or I'll send you a link to that. Okay.
Alrighty.
Is that why you're asking, Alyssa?
Yeah.
You want to see it? Yeah. Yeah, I decided because this is a really important thing. Like I did the last lecture, I'm going to do the same for this one and upload it. So, okay. So let's look at this drawing. So here's one version. This was like the second version of Sarah's drawing. That I kind of corrected here. So you can kind of see the old drawing right here. This icon's in the way, but there's the angle, there's the roof line angle. Erase that. At this point, to your point, Taylor, she was starting to see the front of the closet area, right? So she's starting to recognize that there was dimension to that area, okay? in this drawing, the first drawing, you can see here, she kind of came down and just like didn't even, it looked like she started to think about it, but then just stopped, Up here, look at the little overlap there. See how that looks a little closer to us than this, which seems like it's further back, right? So she's starting to understand a little bit of the overlap. Of course, later on in the drawing, she really understood that, right? Started to kind of see it again, right? She started to let her brain register it. She was seeing it all along, but her brain just wasn't registering it, okay? So in this one that I kind of helped her out with in terms of perspective, this goes back to your question, this is about vanishing points. So why in this version right here, you can see it's almost the same as this one, right? It's close to it, right? I'm not sure if it's the same drawing, but she might have changed, start over. Why, obviously here's the vanishing point right here. Why in this drawing would we see a vanishing point and not in most of you guys' drawings?
Because of how it's angled?
That's correct. That's it exactly. So what happens is this wall almost becomes 1 point perspective. It almost doesn't have any angles. But notice the, let me go to the red here. I think I got the red. I got the red. So the bottom of this wall right here, as it moves in this direction, and the top of this wall, as it moves in this direction, would go to a vanishing point way off the edge of the paper in this direction. So every line that is parallel to that wall that's a horizontal goes to a vanishing point off the edge of the paper. On the other hand, since this is so flat, all of a sudden this gets super angular, right? Very, very foreshortened on this wall. So every line on this wall that's running in the same direction, we'll call that the same wall, right? Because that plane's running in the same direction. Notice would go to the one vanishing point right there. Okay. So it depends on your position in space, whether you could see the vanishing point. Then the next question is, how do you find that vanishing point if you can? Okay. Well, here's how, in her drawing initially, I had to, this gets a little complicated, so bear with me. When I was trying to correct her drawing, I had to establish an idea of maybe how high her head was in the room. She said she was sitting, okay? So that's the first thing I looked for in this drawing. I looked at this little kick wall right here. Call that a kick wall, kind of a wall before the angled ceiling wall, right? Like it's an A-frame, like an attic sort of kind of configuration, right? So I figured the kick wall was, maybe this high or something like that, eye level, but she's sitting. So her eye level relative to this kick wall right here would have to be below it, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go back to the drawing that I corrected for her. So I had to put a horizon line in it because I wanted to talk to her about vanishing point. Because in this scenario we see the vanishing point. Even if you don't see the vanishing point, it's nice to know where your horizon line is, your eye level relative to the room. Okay, so I could have put, like if she said right here, there's that line right there where that little kick wall and the pitched wall, right, the ceiling wall kind of meet before the skylight. And there was the corner right there, right, of her drawing. All I did was move that up in space a little bit, okay? I made that bigger, okay? And here's why. If I were to obey her first kind of observation here, that this wall should be this short, that would have put the horizon line, okay, you ready? About there, okay? Remember, this was her original height for that little wall right there. Okay, so I'm going down a little bit. Imagine her seated, looking at the room. And then I'll stretch this imaginary line across the drawing that represents her height relative to the whole room. The whole room. Not just that corner, the whole room. So, let's go over here then, where the window is. Do you think if she's sitting in a chair, her head would be as high as that line is relative to the window?
No.
No, that's way too low, right? You're just sitting by a window, your head's going to be maybe mid first pane of the window right there. Yeah? Yeah. So I had to make a decision as a teacher here to try to instruct her, because I have to be her eyes for a second, right? And this goes with all of you. So then I said, well, if that's not going to work over here, lowering this here, let's go over to the window. If I'm sitting in a chair next to the window, I would imagine my head would be about that height. Okay, so I made a decision which one of those options to go with. Obviously, the drawing's not correct, right? Because they don't work, they don't gel. So I went over and I figured out how high my head would be if I pulled a chair up next to a window and sat there. Remember, if I'm sitting there in the chair at that level, I'm sitting back here at that level, it's all the same. It doesn't matter where I'm sitting in the room, that's my eye level relative to the whole space, okay? That's a hard concept for students to understand. So I made a decision to use this level right here as the horizon line. So the first thing I did, put a line right across the whole drawing before I put any of these other marks there. Okay. Now, in order to make this make sense over here then, my solution would be, because my head would be too high if it was in the corner, was just raise that wall a bit. So now eye level, head level, is lower than this line right here, right? So I just raised that up, kept all this stuff down here because that's all connected. She did a good job connecting that. Okay, so I had eye level, and I enlarged this area that's closer to me, in other words, right? So you can kind of see there's her original pitch line, right? And all I did was kind of go up. It's just a little higher on the picture plane, right? So just made this whole unit right here bigger, that's all, okay? Now, I haven't solved the problem of where the vanishing point is, and here's how you do it. So once I have the eye level, and once I went with her, you know, that this is the width of that plane right there facing me, went down to this corner, went out, boom, right here. Okay, I know that's where this plane and this plane come together, okay? So I'm just going down.
Professor,
Going over. Yes.
when you say this, I'm having a hard time figuring out what you mean by this.
Which this did
Maybe we should be able to see your cursor or something, but I'm not.
Oh, okay.
seeing it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that could be. It's a little. When it moves, it's like really. I have to kind of really
it's
wiggle it.
reading.
Sometimes I don't do that. So
Okay.
that's a
Thank
good
you.
question.
Okay.
So let me back up then. So I established the height of the line relative to, you know, where her head would be if she's sitting in a chair down there, right? And then struck that eye line or eye level or horizon line all the way across the paper. So that put me in a predicament right here, because that meant the wall that she originally drew right there, her head or eye level would be as tall as this wall is right here. Right? And that didn't make sense. So to correct that, I brought this wall up higher. Okay? And just mimicked the lines she had already drawn, but just up on the paper higher. See, there's her original line for the angle, and there's the original line. So I made bigger this side of the stuff that's going on here, okay? So that this area over here and this area over here relative to horizon line, which I established relative to this window, we're now agreeing with one another. Because her head could not be as high as the mid window, and her head couldn't be as high as this, okay? It would just, the room would be too short, okay? So certain kind of, you know, proportional issues that go on relative to our body sizes, general body sizes, right, that we need to think about. Okay, so I have not found this vanishing point, and here's how I did it now. So, you know, I started redrawing this stuff, I dropped this. She had that corner right there. All was good. This line I kept everything down here that she drew. I got to this corner. Felt to me like she was really seeing the angle of that. Now that's a tricky one. Some folks, the novice, would do this with this angle right here. With this angle, okay? They would flatten it out because it's kind of unbelievable that it's that, so it looks something like that, right? But that's really foreshortened. By the way, she did a good job with that, right? This angle right here, she did a good job capturing that. That's her original angle. No, and she did a good job capturing this angle, by the way. But is this angle here the same angle as this angle on the paper? Even though they're parallel with each other in reality, do those angles look the same? No. Which one's more vertical?
The one in front of the door.
Yes. And why is that more vertical?
It's closer to the center.
Or the viewers, or the drawers, or the viewers' relative body position to the room, right? That's where the vanishing point would be, behind that wall, okay, essentially. So all you have to do to find that is, if you get one angle in your drawing that's really good, both of those would work, but so happens that this all worked out. Watch how it works out. So I take this line right here, the angle of this, right? And all I need to do is go up until it does what? I'm going into infinity, but I'm going up on the paper. That crosses what?
It hits the horizon line.
Hits the horizon line. Where do the vanishing points live?
On horizon line.
The happy little vanishing points on the horizon line. Our happy little vanishing points live on the horizon line. Who am I referring to? Happy trees? No? Happy little trees? Let's make a happy little tree today. Let's paint a happy little tree today.
Bob Ross.
Oh, Bob Ross. Yeah, Bob Ross. Thanks. I just talk about happy little vanishing points. That's all.
The moment like happy. Oh,
Bob Ross. You know Bob Ross, right? Yeah. So once you figure out the height of where you are in the room relative to some verticals you establish, right? That's important, right? That's why when we did our imagined scene, I had you think about, are you sitting? Are you standing? Are you on a ladder? Once you figure that out, strike your horizon line. Then I could take either of those. What would I do if I use this angle? That goes to the same place. So she did an outstanding job. She didn't have the vanishing point in this drawing, but she did an outstanding job approximating this angle and approximating this angle. Okay, look, they all cross right on that horizon line, right at that vanishing point right there. Pretty cool. And that lives in infinity, right? That's way, way far away. It's like, essentially what's happening, the distance from here to here gets smaller as it moves back to the vanishing point, right? It's like the railroad tracks. Imagine that, a set of railroad tracks going back to the vanishing point across the desert, right? Okay.
So question,
Yep.
if she hadn't done so well in getting both lines to merge on the horizon line, is there a particular way you choose which one to use?
Yeah, that's a tough thing, and it's kind of trial and error. That's like it's this malleable sort of process, right? You're like, well, is that right, or is it? And you don't know until you start to push and pull the drawing and reduce and make bigger, and And the error that I see constantly is the student will kind of go to the first thing and then just stick with it, or they'll stick with the wrong thing. And that's why I'm here too, to help you out with that as well, right? So if you submit your drawing, a little early on, or if you do the Q&A on the Thursday or whatever, I can kind of help you out then and say, oh, this is good. And notice, some folks, I kind of corrected your drawing and, and just kind of walked you through it a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm here for, but it's also back to that, which I'll cover here in a second, and I figured out a kind of another way to kind of approximate these angles. but yeah, that's a hard one. It really is a difficult one. Yeah, it's a really difficult one. It's just like practicing it over and over. One angle, maybe just go with one of them and like really focus on that for 20 minutes relative, and then put it on the paper and then change it. And is that closer? Is this close? You know, it's, as you guys know all too well, it's really difficult. Really difficult. So that's a really good question. Okay, so once you understand that, you get eye level relative kind of to this construction, and that goes back to visual measurement as well. You know, am I getting the height of this room high enough relative to its width, and all those things are in there. Once you do that, you're okay. Okay. Now, remember when I did that, I didn't have any of these green lines here. Okay, so I'm going to come in and show you how I corrected her drawing just using the vanishing point now. So notice the angle here that she's getting for the top of that wall. That would never hit the vanishing point. Even now, if her wall was, I made it taller, right? Because we had to expand the room a little bit for the horizon line issues, for eye level issues. If the wall were right there where she, you know, says it ended, there would be the angle. Okay, very foreshortened. Okay, and see what she did? She erred on the side of making it more like she knows it, which is horizontal, right? Brought that up a little bit. Okay, so where she really did a good job at the bottom, she kind of, and you kind of fell apart a little bit with the approximately those angles at the top, right? Okay. Now it just so happens I made that wall taller, right? So, you know, I took it from here up to here, right? So that made it go up. You know, that made the corner not here anymore, but up here, okay? So so I already had the width, right? Had that down to the bottom. So I just took this line straight up, past where she did it. And where that met the angle of this gave me the new corner of that thing. Okay? Now I have another reference point right here. What do I do with that to figure out the angle of this? The angle of the top of that wall that's a closet wall, the front. How did I figure out this angle right here? That angle. How did I figure that out?
You took it to the vanishing point.
Exactly. I already had a vanishing point established, so voila, the new angle. And I didn't even have to measure that. I didn't even have to approximate that angle. Once you start locking in, if you have a vanishing point that you can refer to. That's not always the case, but I'm telling you this just for your, you know, kind of conceptual reference. And if you, in my drawing that I did with you guys, I didn't use a vanishing point, but the one wall with the mirror on it, you know, the one I sent out as we were working on this, I don't know if you saw it, I did 4 different versions. That wall happened to kind of house a vanishing point for the right wall. I didn't use it in the drawing, but that, if I needed to, I could have done that, okay? So now look how every line in this drawing, and these are just big, you know, really important conceptual concerns here. So I'm going to point out the lines now that I was able to extend to that vanishing point. Or the edges, I call them lines, but that one, she did a good job with those. Those are pretty angular. That's really cool. She did a really good job with that line. Here she had a little bit of trouble. She had hers ceiling kind of going that way. Here kind of got lost. Didn't know. It's hard to really assess that, right? So in fact, all I needed to do to really figure it out was understand where that point was, and then take that point, line it up with the vanishing point, right, with my straight edge, and strike a line right up through there, right, to get that angle. Same here. I have the corner of the room right here. All I needed is come from a vanishing point, and it gave me a new angle there. Okay. So if you have the luxury of having finding the vanishing point, and the luxury is afforded in this drawing and in most every other drawing by your position in space. Are you looking at one wall more straight on than the other? Are you closer to one wall? In this scenario, she was much closer to the left wall than the front wall or the right wall in this scenario, right? So if she moved out in space this way and sat out more in the room, out to the room, out here somewhere, you know where I'm talking about, out from this left wall, what would happen to this angle right here? Just use your conceptualization hats now. There's that angle she struck. What would happen to that angle if she all of a sudden moved out into space here on the right hand, moved out into the, would that angle become more vertical or more horizontal?
Horizontal.
Great, exactly. So this would start to flare this way. Okay. What would happen to this angle?
If she just shimmied that way,
She just moved out into space. But she was still turning her body to look into the corner of the room, right? You're not just moving laterally here. You're moving and looking into the corner.
Oh, the more you turn, the more vertical you get.
Yep, exactly. So this would go like this, right? So if we could see the whole room, maybe something like, if I could see the corner of that. So see how your position in space, let's pretend it's just a regular room here. Something like that, right? So now I've moved to the right and still am looking in the corner, okay? Let's try something here. So I'm going to move out even more into and almost look directly into the corner, not quite. Watch what happens now. The corner doesn't change. I'm going to keep that the same. This is kind of a new room, but I'll just draw over top of it. This gets a little more horizontal. So notice these start flattening out a little bit more. And these start to take on more of an angle. All of a sudden, now we're getting closer to an equilibrium where the right wall is as close to me as the left wall is. Okay? So if I were to draw a door, again, this is just a separate drawing here, but put a door in this wall, this new wall that I invented, right? Don't even look at her drawing, but I'm just kind of putting a drawing. So, right? Another door over here. Now, in this scenario, I don't see, let's call this the blue room. This blue room exists apart from all those other lines. In this scenario, I don't see either vanishing point probably, because watch what happens. That's not intersecting the horizon line. That's right. I don't see the vanishing point for the right wall. Do I see the vanishing point for the left wall? Let's test it out here. Yeah, right there. You know, if I did all my angles correct, it might be right there. But let's say I didn't, okay? Let's say I didn't. Say I didn't have enough room to, it kind of went off the edge over here, just a little bit. So I don't have the luxury anymore of finding a vanishing point. I still have the horizon line right here. You know, where am I? There's the horizon line is still there, right? Relative to my, we're back to drawing the 2-point perspective invented room, right? So the horizon line and vanishing point still come in handy because your knowledge of them tells you, I know the horizon line's here, my eye level relative to the room I'm drawing, right? So let's say I had a cabinet or something or a shelf that I needed to draw that was on this wall right here. It's about halfway the height of my eye level relative to the bottom of the wall. What angle should I strike for that? I'm going to measure it, but excuse me, what does my knowledge of perspective tell me that angle should be?
Which angle? I'm sorry.
I'm going to do let's say I'm putting a shelf right here on that wall between the door and the corner of the room, right in here somewhere. Ignore all these other lines. This is the blue room. We're in our imaginary room now. So I want to put a shelf on the wall here between the door and the corner of the room. That shelf's horizontal, so I could approximate the angle of that shelf. That, in addition to me understanding that there's a vanishing point involved in the drawing of this wall, helps me establish the angle of that line. Okay? So tell me which one of these lines I'm drawing is correct. I'll do 3 versions: number 1, number 2, and number 3. So this is just a shelf on the wall. Here's number 1. Here's number 2. And here's number 3. 2. Okay. Why 2?
It's about halfway between the
Yep.
horizon line and the floor.
Right.
And so the angle should be in relationship to those, not horizontal, but
Right.
not as steep as the floor.
So here's how this horizon line can save you. A knowledge of where that there's a convergence of these parallel horizontal lines. Some folks would just see that shelf as a horizontal line and do that, right? Or they might go up here, often not, but they might kind of put it at that angle, right? Even go the opposite or something, right? But your knowledge that the eye level, if the shelf was at eye level, what would it look like? Or like, let's say it's right at my eye level on the horizon line, what would it look like? I'll put it up here now. It would look like that. It's a line straight across, right? It's right at eye level. So what Judy's saying is, you recognizing that this point on the wall right here is at eye level, even though you can't see a horizon line on that wall when you're looking at it. You got to know your eye level relative to it. Stephanie, you okay? Stephanie? Stephanie? I can't hear you.
I'm fine. I just said it's hard for me.
I know. I had a student yesterday say, what?
Yeah, no. I get that. But it's like, I wish we were just hanging out in a classroom.
I know.
Not in a Zoom classroom, but I'm here.
But the more you do this, the better you get at it. That's my point, right? And even in a classroom, it's hard as hell. I mean, it really is. So, so once you establish eye level relative to something, in this case, it's the height of this wall. What Judy's saying is, when you're looking at an object that's on that wall, like a shelf, if that shelf was at your eye level, it would be absolutely horizontal, right? Because it's even with your eye level. And so if you know where that horizon line is on your drawing, which it's important to figure that out when you're looking in your room. So you start your drawing and then you figure out where your eye level is relative to the room, and then you kind of strike a line across that gives you a sense of your height relative to this thing you're starting to draw, which I did in Sarah's drawing here to figure out the angles. Once you figure that out, what Judy's saying here, if the shelf was below eye level, and you got to think about that. It's not just a shelf, it's a thing in the world that has a relationship to your body, i.e. the height of your head. So once you figure out, obviously that's low. If I went over, took my chair over and sat by that shelf, obviously that's like chest high or stomach high. So that shelf's a lot lower than my eye level. So I'll take my chair back, keep drawing my drawing, and know that the angle I draw that shelf now has to be somewhere between horizontal, my eye level, and whatever angle I created for the bottom of the room. So that gives you a guide as to, even though you can't see the vanishing point, it's probably splitting the difference in some way. So if I had a series of shelves, they would all kind of, as they moved up the wall, get flatter and flatter and flatter until they almost got to the eye level. And then if they go above the eye level, those shelves, that rack of shelves, would pitch downward. Pitch downward. Yeah, I kind of messed up a little bit, but I'm pretty close. Until they get to the top of the wall and they're parallel to the top of the wall. So they're all those shelves that are on that wall have to go to that vanishing point that we don't see. It's off the edge of the paper in this scenario, okay? And we saw it in the other scenario because we were closer to one of the planes or the walls, and then the other wall was facing us directly. So this wall that we were closer to is foreshortened. Okay. Most of your drawings probably reflect this scenario. I'm not sure, but probably a lot of them reflect this scenario where you got equal, you give equal deference to both walls. You're not really close to one or you're not close to the other. So that means that you're going to have to kind of navigate, the angles and you don't have a vanishing point to go to, let's put it that way, okay, in that scenario. Okay, you're going to have to kind of think about this idea of convergence of it, all horizontal lines on the wall. Okay. So look at that whole image right there I just drew. That's a work of art in itself. Right? All the information that's embedded in that, somebody would look at that and say, what the hell is that? Like 3 different rooms? Okay. Again, don't expect to understand this by me talking at you. But it's a process of osmosis. Once in a while, something will resonate when you're making your drawings. Oh, well, yeah, he mentioned that. That's how you get that. So now I know what he's saying. And then I get this a lot with students is they'll work on it, and then I keep saying it over and working on it. Then they get it and finally registers because they're actually acting it out in their drawing. And they'll say, why didn't you tell me that in the first place? And of course, I've been like saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So I say that as in jest, but I also say it because that's the way we learn in drawing and painting and every other kind of discipline. I still don't know what the hell my MFA professor was talking about. So, every now and then something might register in my life or, whatever I'm doing. It's like, oh, that's what he meant. And that's how I can relate it to art. And, it gets that's every bit as complicated, as perspective. So, conceptual issues in art, right? This idea of layering of images, context, all that sort of stuff. Okay. So we covered that. Any questions? Go ahead. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that, like, when we're doing a corner, that first vertical line, or when we're looking at a size of a corner, the smaller it is, the more you get the depth?
Yes.
In the room?
Well, the more of the room you'll get. Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
The more of the room you'll get. That's correct. Yep. That's correct.
Okay, so why is the word depth not correct?
Well, depth is like she could have drawn this drawing over here on the left in such a way that it looked just like this, but I don't know if you can see that dotted line there that I created, that box kind of, can you see that?
Yeah.
It doesn't come out, it doesn't show, but so essentially kind of that's was kind of her view of that first, not she didn't even see the floor down here, right? So it's still there. If I literally cut this drawing on the right, crop it to that where that dotted line is, it still has depth, right? It still has this illusion of depth, right? So from how I define depth is it look 3D, But is the space more expansive or is it more intimate? I guess those might be a better word in terms of that. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. By the way, how would one figure out, just see how foreshortened this area is right here where the closet is, how narrow this is? How would you figure out how narrow to make that in your drawing? Because that's a long distance right there. There's no closet that's like this wide that you can get into, right? It is kind of that wide on the piece of paper, right? Real narrow relative to the other stuff. That's called foreshortening, right? How would you figure out the foreshortening of that plane that's moving away to the corner of the room?
Measure it with your pencil?
Measure the width of it, right? Yeah, you take your pencil, close one eye, slide it over, grab the width. Now what do I do with that? I'm doing this in real life now.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do with the width of that thing?
Move it to the paper?
Not yet. I got to figure out a ratio. So what?
You compare the top of it to the sides.
Yeah. So this height to width issue. So all I would do is take the width of that because I know it's way smaller. And I could turn that and stack it in the height. And I'm just going to do it on the screen here. Her drawing indicates that the way she was seeing that closet, the front corner of that, jet out cube that is the closet area, the width of it, of that opening, or of the plane that's moving away from us, fits in the height of that corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 times, 5 times. So the width of this, I don't know if you can see it or not, my arrow, try to get my arrow activated here. Right there. The width of that fits in the height of this. I gotta go really fast. It's not doing it. Well, anyways, the height of this corner right there, that corner. Oh, you can see that. So do that. So the height of this corner, where the two planes meet, right there. The width of this fits in the height in her drawing 5 times roughly. So that means if you're really concerned about that, you're going to measure the real situation to make sure that reflects what you're drawing. And it's a bunch of pieces of the puzzle, that in connection with the angles, and it all fits together. Now the photograph will do this automatically. Boom. The camera does not even need to think about it. Okay? So the question might arise, if I want to be an abstract artist, why do I even need to think about this stuff? Why do I need to measure the world and think about all these nuances that are in the world around me if I'm just going to do abstract work or 3-dimensional work or whatever the case may be, ceramics, sculpture, I don't have to deal with drawing. Painting even, if I'm an abstract non-objective painter, I don't even have to deal with that. Okay? What's the point? What's that?
Because you need to know how the world itself works before you can make abstract version of it.
You do, if you're an abstractionist, certainly. And there's something called non-objective art, which is there's no recognizable image whatsoever. Everybody knows abstract art, like Picasso's Cubism, maybe. Let's look at real quick an image here. Because this is an important issue. So let's look at this. This might be Braque, portrait of Picasso. I don't know, but so Cubism, right? You break things down into planes. It's just a different way of viewing the world, right? The Cubists were trying to kind of view the world from different angles, right? So they're abstracting the experience, right? And putting it onto a 2-dimensional plane. So an argument might be made that this is even more realistic than what we're doing. But a keen knowledge of perspective would be needed to do this. You need to really understand how to flatten things out in an effective way, right? So this would be a nice example of what David's talking about, taking the real world and distilling it and changing it to suit your own needs as an artist expressively, right? Then there's something called non-objective art, where the artist, this is Morris Louis, painting, huge kind of painting, stain painting on canvas. So this is about presence and scale. This painting might be the size of one of my walls or something, But he's still, in making this painting, trying to understand the nature of experience, right? And thinking about scale. So these things are definitely longer than they are wide. They kind of taper in as they move down. So there's kind of a little homage to perspective there, right? It might look like a radiator. He might have been kind of really informed by these old radiator grills, that are steam heat. It kind of looks like that to me, an accordion, So whatever the case being, even though this is not directly referential to the world, you're still using the world to learn from. Nothing is created in a vacuum. Nothing. So the better you get at seeing the world around you, the better you are at everything else, in my opinion. Particularly in visual arts, right? So you may not be interested at all being a realist or naturalist, or doing your own work this way, but it really tunes you in to the subtleties that are that are around you, number one, and how they change relative to your body movement. Okay? Even a performance artist could benefit from this, right? Somebody who performs, they're moving their body all the time. A dancer could benefit from this knowledge. Here's a nice example of a non-objective artist. This is paint on canvas. You can kind of see the floor down here in the white wall. This is Ellsworth Kelly. Now, you wouldn't think it, but he derives meaning by making drawings of plants. So here's an example of observation of real world objects in real time. He wouldn't use a photograph for this. You just kind of go and study these plants and do these really beautiful contour drawings, contour line drawings. Again, there's perspective here because overlapping lines, we'll talk about that later. So we get a sense that one form rides in front of the other because overlapping lines. But my point is that he's studying the way plants look, right? And this kind of delicate balance and this dance that exists in nature in order to make totally non-objective work, right? Okay. I wouldn't necessarily see plants there, but if you want to, you could, right? So his observation, he's serious about his drawing, right? So his observation of the world he uses to inform his main work, let's say, the painting. He's a well-known non-objectivist painter, abstract might be, you could apply it to this, but technically speaking, that's not the correct term for this type of work. So that kind of answers that question, right? As to what benefit, why not just draw from a photograph? And as I mentioned before, we all kind of cut our teeth that way, right? And it kind of stunts our ability to really see the world. We live in that world of flat pictures, even more so now, right? The screens, we have to live by that. I mean, that's our world now because of the pandemic. So not to mention, the horrors of social media. I mean, you're tied to the screen, right? So you're not really when I was a kid, we would go out and outside and be out there for 8 to 10 hours and just roam around and play and, use the world as I'm sorry, I'm preaching to you, but my point is that it stunts your growth as a sentient feeling being, right? So actually, if you move your head a little bit, the whole room moves. You're not always aware of that, but if you move your head just a little bit, or I turn my body a little, oh my God, that's going to mess everything up, right? So that's a nice place to be as an artist because you're really tuning into the world. It's a Zen thing too, Zen meditation, kind of being present and centered and all that sort of stuff. Okay, there's my why diatribe. One more thing here. Any questions about this? So framing, how do you frame the drawing? How much of the room you're going to get in? Okay, that's important. Angle, there's various methodologies here. Oh, one thing I wanted to show you about the angle. So we looked at this video, but we're almost done here. When I was holding the pencil up here, in that one video that I showed you, approximating the angles, right, of things. One nice thing to think about, I'm going to try to find my pencil getting into an angle here. Okay, so right there. Right there. So you can see I'm holding the pencil up. I'm trying to estimate the angle of, I can't make this any bigger, so hopefully you can kind of see it. There's a coffee table right here. That's the drawing I drew. Same thing I did with this demonstration over here. That was the finished drawing I drew that I sent out last week. There's a certain angle to this end table right here, or coffee table. So indeed, we know that when I'm holding my pencil up and keeping it parallel to my body, I'm not tipping it away from my face in the direction of the thing I'm measuring. Never do that. This stays parallel to your body. All you're doing with this pencil, closing one eye, lining up with a particular edge, and just twisting it clockwise or counterclockwise to line it up with an edge, okay? That's all you're doing. So, bringing up the idea of a clock. Let's think about a clock rather than 45-degree angles. So I'm closing one eye and I'm spinning the hands of the clock around. The point of the tip of the pencil is the finger of the clock, for lack of a better word, the pointer of the clock. And then the pivot point of the clock is here where it connects, the arm, the hand. It's not a hand, it's an arm. The hand, this should be an arm of the clock, not a hand of the clock. This should be the hand out here. This should be the arm of the clock. Pivoting, the hand of the clock is pivoting around that thing that's connected there. And then we have a series of numbers, right, that go around, okay? And we're used to clockwise, counterclockwise. So if this is the outer part of the hand of the clock, the pencil right here, tip of the pencil, and I'm lining up with the edge of my coffee table right there, closing one eye. I've struck an angle, right? Now, think about a clock right behind my pencil, okay? And a big clock or a little clock, doesn't matter. Just make sure, like let's say the pivot point of the clock is right here. And you have the clock right here. And you have 12 o'clock up here at the top, right? 12, 6 o'clock at the bottom, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. What time of the day am I indicating by the angle of that pencil?
I think it's about 10 or maybe a little past 10.
Yeah, so now you're starting to get a sense of the angle of that, right? Okay. What would a 12 o'clock angle look like?
Purely vertical.
Yeah. And usually you're going to go from somewhere around 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock when you guesstimate angles, right? No matter what you're doing, you're kind of turning. I guess you could do it this way, so that would be 3 o'clock, go the other way, 3 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So that's going to be the range of angles that you're going to guesstimate. So let's go to the drawing here and just let me show you. So then when I pop that line in my drawing, I'm going to do the other one, that's harder to see. This angle right here right, the angle of the end of that coffee table. Go a little bigger with that so you can kind of see it. Should be, that's a little more, that's like, that would be like 10 o'clock, or that would be 9 o'clock. So it's like between 10 o'clock and maybe 11 o'clock, right? Which I think you said, Judy, right? Something like that. I think that's what you're saying. So there I am estimating it, and here I am executing it. It's right here. That's the angle. Okay? Now I didn't come to that to begin with. It took some time, but eventually, I had to map it in to begin with to figure out what that was. So if you think about this angle approximation in terms of just turning this thing along a imaginary clock, okay? That might be easier to think about than the idea of 45-degree angle, vertical, horizontal. Even those are kind of easy to think about, but maybe when you're looking at your pencil, if you think, oh, there's like 10 o'clock right there. And then go to your drawing and just duplicate that, despite what your brain's telling you. Okay, your brain's saying it's this. It's a horizontal line. And it is in reality. If I measured that coffee table from the floor, that would be parallel to the floor, right? Which we know as absolutely horizontal. Let's look here, for instance. Look at the angle of this edge of the table right here. Okay? So the bottom of that stereo stand. Those are two horizontal lines in reality that are parallel to each other, right? One's closer to me, or when I say lines, I mean edges, right? One's closer to me, the coffee table. Closer to me, right? No, that's closer because it's lower on the paper. Here's the back edge of of that stereo stand here is that, and that's down lower on the paper. So obviously this coffee table is closer to me. So this edge right here is closer to me. Whoop. But the plane of this table okay, i.e. the bottom of it, is parallel to the coffee table. Are they far apart on the drawing, though? Literally on the drawing. Are these two lines far apart from one another? On the drawing.
No.
Look at the whole drawing. They're relatively close on the whole drawing, right? Are they far apart from each other in reality? Yes, I can tell you by experience they're about 3 or 4 feet apart. At least. That's a pretty big distance. One further back, one closer. So your brain is going to say that they won't be the same or close to the same angle when you draw them. Because your brain is saying, well, how could that be the same as this? And that? But on the paper, they're really close to one another. So notice the angle of this is very close to the angle of this. In fact, they'll probably cross somewhere. Like, I don't know, somewhere in here. Right at the edge of the paper, right? So the fact that this, when I approximate it, and they're close to each other on the paper, and they're going in the same direction, they're parallel to each other in reality, are pitching in a little bit to meet where? Where are they going to meet?
The horizon line.
Right at, or what's on the horizon line?
Vanishing point.
That's it right there. So if I just approximate those two things correctly, all of a sudden I know where they can just literally lay my ruler right on the paper, connect them. I don't even need to think much about it now, but I could say, oh, there's maybe a horizon line right there on the paper, right? And then I double check it and I think, oh yeah, my eye level relative to these ribbons that are holding the curtains is a little lower. Voila. I've figured out where the horizon line is. I did it kind of a backwards way by 2 lines I estimated meeting. Now you're not always right, so you got to let's triple check it. I don't know. Let me say, oh, if these 2 lines are converging over here, so too should every other line that's moving in that direction. Let's check it out. Pretty close. Let's check this out. So if you estimated just those 3 angles when you're looking at it, and you got it close, and they were all kind of coming to the same spot on the drawing, you know that the vanishing point is going to be on the drawing. And where they come to kind of, come together at that point, that's going to be the height of your eye level. So you could know that everything above that line is going to be above your eye level, everything below is going to be below. That's a nice way to help you out, right? Let's check the other direction, this other wall. That's never going to meet. That's going to go way off, and this coffee table is parallel with that, so that's going to go, those will never meet, but they'll meet somewhere off the edge of the paper. So obviously, which wall am I closer to in this drawing? The right wall? Yep, the right wall. Why? Because I can kind of see the vanishing point on the left wall. So that tells me it's a little more open. It's a little more one-point perspective-ish. Whereas this one's more foreshortened. Okay? Okay. So that angle approximation is a tricky thing indeed. Okay? So is visual measurement. Okay? Literally, in this drawing, and I walked you through it here, but there could be thousands of different visual measurements you could make. I could measure the width of this versus the height. I could measure the width of the window casing versus its height. I could measure the width of this, obviously, this is a width to height issue versus this. I go for the small measurement first and count it into the larger, what I perceive to be the small. I could measure the height of this into the width of this. There I'm measuring 2 things that aren't related to one another but have a relationship in real life, right? I could measure, you know what I'm saying, right? So it's not always a height to width of one singular object. It's proportion within an object. But there's also proportion within the field of view. How many, I could ask Blake, how many? Okay, Blake, I'll answer you. How many of these, the height of these little this platter form setting on the table, fits in the width of the couch? And I'll do it right now. I'll put my pencil, I've got 1, 2, 3. Now I'm measuring on the drawing, right? But that means that I would have to assess this in real life too to get it correct. So I'd literally go to my real life situation, measure the width of that platter, take it over to the couch and count across to make sure I'm getting the right proportion of everything across the picture plane. That in combination with the guesstimation of angle, in the combination of height to width of an object in and of itself, like what is the depth of this table, let's say, the length of it, I'm sorry, versus its height. That's an obvious one, right? Now remember, when you're measuring depth of something, your tendency is going to want to take this pencil and tip it away from you in the direction of that whatever table that's moving away from your measuring. Can't do that because you're violating the flatness of the drawing. The only reason you're using this pencil is to duplicate the flatness of the drawing. Okay, so don't do that. So you got 3 things to think about in terms of measurement, assessing measurement in the world around you, once you establish a sense of scale in the drawing. 3 things, 3 discrete things. What are those 3 discrete things? We've already established a kind of sense of scale because we started our drawing. So now we're going to engage in an activity of nonstop measuring. What are the 3 things you're going to measure? When I say measuring, that's an inclusive term.
Angle?
Angles, 1. So that's angle approximation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Length?
Okay, that falls in the category of visual measurement, right? So we got visual measurement, right? So length of an object, I won't give it away. So length of something versus width of something, right?
Oh.
What's that called? That's called
Proportion.
proportion, yeah. So length versus width of an object. And one more thing, in terms of measurement. I just went over it.
I think you mean location. Is that what came up last week?
Yeah,
So the relationship
Rate-
has
yes.
the other stuff in the room.
Yes, that's it. So relation from object to object, okay? So that's another visual measurement. Okay, so 2 prongs of the visual measurement. That's length to width of one particular object of itself, right?
Okay.
And then it's the length of something versus the length of something else in the room, okay? To get overall proportions, okay? All right? It's a big puzzle. That's all you, because if you don't start to even think about this stuff, it's just purely reactive. And that's why I see drawings that, I haven't seen it this time through, but I see drawings literally that they'll draw the room like this, even though they're looking at it, okay? Right? Maybe I saw one in the other class, I can't remember. But they'll draw the room like this, right? Because they're just reacting. So at least this gets you a start in terms of so do good with the corner, and then do good with the floor usually. And then here's what happens with the ceiling. Okay. Those lines come down, okay? So like we're flying above the room. That's the only way we can kind of conceptualize the world, generally speaking, if we're not trying to train ourselves to do otherwise, is that we fly over the world, this kind of above, the scene sort of kind of conceptualization. So I see this a lot. So when we draw hallways at school, and this is something you always have to fight, this idea. They'll draw the end wall, the end of the hallway pretty nicely. They'll draw the floor as it opens up to us, so there's the floor of the hallway coming at us. And then we got to draw the ceiling, right? And then this is how we'll get the ceiling drawn. As though you're up in the room, right? Your head has to be above the horizon line for that to happen. Because let's say you're standing in the hallway, that's the horizon line relative to the height of the end of the hall, right? The ceiling has to go down to the horizon line, not up. So the hallway opens up to you like this, right? Because the horizon line's got to be below the ceiling. Otherwise, your head's through the ceiling, right? So this is a one-point scenario, but all these lines will converge, through the corners of the room at the vanishing point. That's one-point perspective. But my point is that I see this a lot, not all the time, but I do see it. That here's how they'll draw it. They'll feel like it has to go down on the paper in order for it to look like it's coming closer to us, right? We talked about that before. So there's where the brain is like just taking over and doing what it wants to do. Your eye's seeing those angles go up. So the measuring is going to help you see that, okay? And the better you get at it, the more nuanced it gets, and then you'll become one of the greatest non-objective painters in the world, right? Because you're tied into the universe, right? So from a visual standpoint. It's like practicing your scales, right? As a musician. Gets you better at moving your fingers, but it also develops your hearing, right? So you can understand tonality and harmony and all those sorts of things, right? So you can kind of write music, right? Or play it, or whatever the case may be. Same principle going on here. Just so we don't need to do this in real life. No need to do this in real life, right? When we're looking at a screen or driving down the road, we just got things we got to do, right? So we don't even think about this stuff, but it's really important. Okay. Any questions about any of that? I'll go over my stuff here. Non-objectives, time, Q&As, do-overs, practice. Where understanding comes in from doing. How many times you have to do something, whatever it takes, to get it right, like Alyssa mentioned. Okay, that's it from my standpoint. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to have you do another rendering, okay? So practice makes perfect, right? You could do 20 of these things. It would take 20 maybe to get it perfect, to really start to get into this. But I think it's good to practice this stuff, right? So, because we're going to be using it throughout the rest of the semester, not in the large, this is really hard. This is much harder than what we'll be using it for, okay? For smaller still life setups. But it still applies to the smaller still life setups, okay? That's why I'm kind of really pushing the boundaries here to begin with you guys. Mm-hmm. So another drawing, same thing. You could be the same corner, a different position if you want to. So just move over a little bit, okay? Same corner, that's fine. So we're going to get 2 drawings out of this, okay? And it's a 2-week. I scheduled 2 weeks for that anyways. Just move. Could be a new corner. One thing to think about here, and it's really hard. I know you guys, it's hard. But trying to simplify as much as possible. I sent out an image here. So this was the finished drawing I did. But all along in this drawing, I was trying, I was really focusing on. So when if you're drawing the same corner, that's not a bad thing either. It's like it's just this is kind of a practice in a certain way, even though you can get a really finished, beautiful drawing this way. Again, using your straight edge for everything. But I did this after the fact because I was thinking about this the whole time, like where I couldn't see the corner of the room all the way down, right? But I knew, and then I approximated the angle of this. I knew the angle of this, and I knew that they probably would meet right behind those components, stereo components, right? So I wouldn't even be able to see the corner, but just by approximating these angles, I could start to construct, that's what I'm doing with the blue lines here, the basic wall unit, even though I don't see it all. I know this runs behind the couch, but even understanding, even drawing that to begin with is not a bad thing. So, because I could see it as an angle relative to this on my paper, which helps me out, right? If I'm just know it's there and I don't even because I can't see it, the couch is in the way. But if I document it on the, on the paper, it kind of helps me out seeing the work, right? And figuring that stuff out. So my point is always default to the larger things in the drawing. So I would say I broke it down into 3 large kind of components. The walls themselves, did that with blue. The 2 window units, I see those as major units in the drawing. and then the cube itself, or the table itself that's holding the components, is a cube, blocks in space. I even noted, and I was thinking about this during the drawing, where's the back corner of that thing? Because I know it's a full cube. So me understanding that this thing's running parallel to the edge of the wall, et cetera, as I draw, really nice conceptual thing to think about. That way I'm not just drawing flat shapes, because endlessly I see this in drawings. It's much easier to tune into shape than it is form. So if you're not understanding these things as solid cubes, everything you draw, didn't do it with the couch, but I could, like the bottom of the couch might go back to there. So that might be a cube, something like, again, I got some experience here, but maybe I don't know, something like that. I don't know. That line's not right. But at least I can conceptualize it, right? And then maybe something like that. I don't know. I'd see a little more of the bottom of it, but maybe something like that would be the bottom part of the couch. But just thinking about that stuff helps in terms of visualizations. So always try to think about the cube. I did that in some of you guys' drawings. Had you start to think about this idea of the cube. So it could be the same view, could be, because it's hard. You got a lot of stuff sometimes in your house, right? How do you sift through that? A different corner. Could you move a little closer to one wall than the other? Whatever you were doing, I wouldn't go too close to one. Don't get real close to one wall, because you still want this little bit of a central sort of kind of vibe going on. I'm not super close to this right wall, but you can obviously see that I am, right? So that helps. So scale, start off thinking about scale. Use your phone for that. Don't draw the picture using your phone, okay? Just use it to get started. Think about how you're measuring, trial and error, 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 trial and error for scale. Trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, trial and error for angle approximation, for visual measurement. You're whittling this drawing into being, okay? Don't ever think the first line you do is correct, okay? Draw lightly, use the straight edge. When you're sure of things, then lock it in with the darker line, okay? That's another way of keeping the drawing fluid. If you make a mark dark, psychologically, you don't want to undo it. And you can, but psychologically you don't want to. So the lighter you mark, here's process informing knowledge. The lighter you draw, and the fact you have to use a straight edge means you have to get that little angle in there. Like I did a couple, 2-3 lines for one particular edge. You guys did that with the books. You did a good job with that. And just whittle away at the thing. You got to make some major changes, make them. Okay. I guess that's it. And I'm here Thursday. Okay. All right. I need to see the angle at which you are viewing the room, and send that along with your first version you want to send me if you want me to help you out with it. Okay. Kind of leaving that up to you, but I will be here on Thursday for question and answer. So by the end of this week, we'll have 2 drawings done. Kind of a first attempt finished work and a second attempt finished work of a corner of the room. Okay?
All right.
Okay. That's a long lecture, but it's a very complicated, as you guys are finding out, process to do all this stuff, okay? And this is me doing it for years, right? So don't expect that you're going to get it. And if you don't get it, don't get frustrated. Okay? Why would you expect to do something I spent 50 years practicing? 60 years. No, 50 years, 55 years. Don't expect it, okay? You could, maybe. It could happen, but my point is it takes a long time to cultivate this, but there's a starting point, right? And you can get to a certain level, it's like, oh, now I can use that for whatever I need to. If I want to make a sketch of a sculptural piece I'm working on, I know generally how to kind of deal with that now, right? So even if it's out of discipline. Okay. Great questions, as always. Really appreciate that. Great commentary as well. I appreciate that. And,
I should be able to get you the first drawing by either today or tomorrow, and then I'll begin the second one.
Okay. And David was sick, so he's usually right on time with stuff. But that brings up the last point. Maybe just pace yourself. Okay. Work a little bit on it right after a lecture that I give on anything we do. Work a little bit, just kind of play a little bit. I know I spend a lot of time here, but we maybe have depending depending on the length of the lecture, an hour or so to kind of play around. And that gets you started. And then when it comes time to the Q&A, you might have some questions the next class time, and I'll have open discussion. You can stop in. Problem is, if you procrastinate, I'm the biggest procrastinator in the world, so I understand it. But if you procrastinate too much and wait to the end, then you don't have time to ask questions, and then the learning kind of process falls apart, right? Even though I give you guys time to correct it, but we're on to something else at that point, right? So kind of get going on a piece early if you can, okay? And just whatever it takes, just a little bit of stuff, right? Just so some questions will start to arise in your head. Otherwise, you block it out, wait till Friday, work on it Friday, and then the questions arise, or you just kind of, and at that point it's almost too late, right, for that turn-in period, right? So a little bit of words to the wise generally in terms of any sort of endeavor one might engage in life. So okay, thanks much, appreciate it.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
have a good day.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Good
You
day.
guys too.
Bye.
Thanks for
Thank
listening.
you.
Bye-bye.